G'day everyone, how are we? Now you're here today with Ed and Dave Swift, and we're at our Printhie cellar door. We are sitting just outside of Orange in beautiful Nashdale, and we're actually here to kick off what was supposed to be the Lane Cove Food and Wine Festival that's now the virtual Food and Wine by the River Festival. So welcome to everyone that's tuned in. Today we'll be covering off a bit of stuff about our Swift Sparkling Rosé, and we'll take everybody through a virtual tasting essentially of that wine, and we'll try and give you a bit of background as well, you know, just how we got to this stage, how the wine, you know, the wines are produced and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, but the thing to note today is that you can, whilst this is the first of a virtual tasting for this festival, there are many others that have been recorded already, and you can go and watch those. Now, to do that,
so just quickly,
yep.
They are posted on the Orange 360 website, orange360.com.au/Lane Cove, I believe, Festival. Lane Cove Festival, and there's a number of producers throughout the Orange region that have pre-recorded some virtual tastings for you to go back and look at. So unfortunately we can't be with you today at Tambourine Bay, which would have been lovely. I am actually a little unsure of the weather in Sydney today, however.
No idea.
It is a shame to be missing, because we do love to get down and share our wines and food and give you a little
people
bit
in Lane Cove.
Correct, a little bit of the Orange experience.
Now, part of the new sort of, you know, fandangled way of the world where we do virtual stuff is that there are wine packs that you can purchase off the back of all these virtual tastings. There's a white pack, a red pack, and a ultimate wine lovers pack, which you can win. One of those is up for some lucky person to win. It includes a bottle of this here rosé that we're going to try today, but it's actually 18 bottles, I believe.
Right.
So it's quite a significant.
Is that a winemaker's
price.
pack?
It's certainly a wine lovers pack.
It's a wine lovers is 18 bottles, like a baker's dozen, perhaps?
Yeah, perhaps. We're being very generous though. We're going well over and
We're
above.
going well above.
But there are packs that you can purchase, and there is that one that you can win. Now, to win that one, I think it is via the Orange 360 website, and possibly linked through via the Facebook page as well. So get on there and register your interest for that one, because not only is there good wine of ours, but there's good wine of lots of Orange producers in that said pack. So well worth getting your hands on.
Could I just add, so one of the reasons we are here presenting to you today from Printhie, during the COVID lockdown, we started doing virtual tastings as part of the experience, to let people get out and in the luxury of their own home, get the feel for a cellar door tasting. So really that is the experience we're hoping to give you today. A chance to talk through some wine with you and give you the idea that you're here, or we are there.
Yes. We've been very lucky actually since the June long weekend, when the restrictions got lifted here in New South Wales. We've had fantastic visitation through the cellar doors here in Orange, and town's been abuzz for months and months, and that's absolutely wonderful. Very disappointing obviously that we can't be down in Sydney conducting this tasting. We understand fully that, you know, restrictions are in place, so we're going to do our best to run you through this wine today. But the process worked really well. When we did these, we ran them for, I don't know, we have a good assistant here that can tell us that sort of stuff. How many weeks did we do the virtual tastings?
We did it for 3 months.
3 months, right, yes, it went like that in the end. But it went really well, and we got a lot of good engagement from people, despite the fact that perhaps not many of you are going to have this exact wine sitting in front of you right now. It does provide you the opportunity to learn a bit more about what we do up here, and the wine styles that we make. And as we said, if sparkling's not your thing, I can't quite imagine that.
No,
for anybody.
Doesn't make any sense at all.
No, it doesn't make any sense at all. But if sparkling's not your thing, there are other ones that you can go and look at. So there's plenty of material there for people to read and view. So it's wonderful. But let's talk about, seeing we're here, why don't we talk about us?
Crew.
Go.
Let's do it. So we're actually going to taste one of our Swift wines today. So Ed and I are brothers. Did we cover that? And our surname is Swift. So we have a separate brand known as Swift Sparkling that are traditional methods, so premium style sparkling wines created here in Orange that sit as a separate business to our Printhie business. So some of you or many people are familiar with Printhie, which typically are still wines.
Yep.
Whereas today we're going to really focus our energy in talking about our sparkling wine, and in particular our rosé, which has picked up a raft of medals and trophies.
Oh gosh, there's just
look,
something here.
they just happen to be sitting here now, including the New South Wales Sparkling of the Year only a week ago.
Yeah, Friday
week.
Friday last.
Yeah. So we thought it was a great opportunity for us to talk about this. It is a wine style that we haven't, a few people know in depth, so we thought we'd cover off a little bit of information around the style.
Just looking across at that beautiful trophy that's sitting over there, Dave, is that the only time we've got that one?
That's a great question. No,
well,
it's
it was
not.
a question from a viewer.
No, it's not. We've actually won this trophy the last 3 years in a row.
Gosh, that's impressive.
Twice with the rosé, and then the first time in 2018 with our Swift Cuvée. That is a white sparkling.
Yeah, beautiful. Excellent. Now, the sparkling line of products for us hasn't been in the portfolio forever. We've just come up to 10 years actually of sparkling wine production, and in fact the day we collected the trophy, we had a 10-year celebration here in our cellar door, and it was going to be a rather large, over-the-top sort of affair, but COVID sort of put an end to that, and we ended up having a more intimate 80 people, 80 of our besties, sitting here in the cellar door doing a really lovely sparkling wine dinner. But take us back 10 years. Why did we go down this path? What was the catalyst?
Well, given the
think?
results are flowing in now, I'm very happy to say that it was actually my decision to push into sparkling wine.
Wholly and solely responsible.
I'm taking full responsibility and credit for the outcome. Had it gone poorly, not so much. So 10 years ago we made the decision to embark on sparkling wine with little idea how the results would be. What we did know though from making wine in Orange for a number of years prior is that the region itself, being a cool climate region based on elevation, the fruit itself had the inherent qualities we need and those known factors we need to make premium sparkling. So that is, we're growing abundant sources at elevation of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, which are the key varieties for making traditional champagne style sparkling wine here in Australia. And we also, due to that cool climate, had lovely acid balance and structure to our fruit, and that again, particularly wines that you want to keep and store for an extended lees aging, that is time in bottle before release. It is imperative that you have that acid structure. So they were the two driving reasons for getting into it. The other side of the coin, I suppose, is that there's nothing better than a product that is primarily used for celebration. And we as a family thought what better product to really embark on than a product that we can really focus on quality, but also focus on a product whereby we can encourage people to celebrate with.
It's always been, Bubbles has always been a product that's aspirational and celebrational, but we've sort of taken a path that these shouldn't be, just for special occasions.
No. So there's we make a number of different wines under the Swift brand. It's not just a one-show pony.
One trick
pony,
I think.
One pony show. But what we're doing here is, and the reason we've separated the brand is that we wanted to showcase different styles of wines through a combination of different effects. So that might be the composition of the blend or the variety, but it also may be stylistically the way the wine is made, and or the time that we keep that prior to release. These are all factors that change the outcome and the style of the wine. So we don't want them all to be just a celebratory aperitif style drinking. They can also be wines of absolute texture and complexity that can be matched with food. And that's really what we're trying to showcase here with the Swift brand.
In terms of the history of this region, Orange as a grape growing region. It's a relatively new wine region. I think we've got our tick of approval. When was that? Late 90s, I think, 99.
Yeah, I mean, there's
As a
development of
registered
vineyards
GI.
earlier, but
Yeah.
really, in terms of broader development, the 90s were a telling time for the orange region.
And we didn't kick off with bubbles as kind of a leading light. And we've had a few varieties that have done particularly well over the years. Things like Chardonnay is a real strength in the region, and every producer here in town would pretty much have one, if not two, maybe three different Chardonnays as part of their portfolio. But we're a lucky region in that we can grow lots of varieties and do lots of things. But this elevation thing is a real key factor here in Orange. When we talk about traditional method sparkling, is there part of the region that particularly lends itself to
Higher elevation.
Yeah.
So typically speaking, the higher you travel, as an indicator, the cooler it becomes, and that in Orange is what gives us our cool climate designation. And the difference we're a region starting at 600 metres above sea level, and the highest vineyard here in Orange is just a little nudge under 1100 metres. So the higher you travel within the region, the cooler the climate becomes, and the more the structure of the acidity becomes such an important part of that grape. So in terms of sparkling, but also looking at other aromatic varietals, Sauvignon Blanc, Riesling, lots of Chardonnay as well, the higher we are, we will get the structure that we need for longevity and wines that will really age exceptionally well. So particularly these wines, we're looking at high elevation sites so that you have that lovely structure.
Was there a reason then why we don't keep going further up the hill? Then if the question is, if we've made the assumption that height is good, why don't we just keep going? Why don't we go higher?
So how high can we go? I guess the top of Mount Canobolas, which gives us our elevation, is 1,398 metres above sea level. And the simple fact is, given that elevation, we do get snow every year. We also are prone to attracting storms and weather that isn't particularly conducive to growing good sparkling. And so so where we're growing to around that 1100 metre mark has typically been considered by the orchardists long before the viticulturists as the ceiling for growing reliably well, growing fruit on a commercial basis.
So there's an inherent risk. Inherent risk in going any higher. Is that
There is.
The long and the short of it?
There is. So while Ed's opening this, we'll have a little drink in the morning.
Look,
what better way to start the day on a Sunday than
one of the things when we were doing our virtual tastings is we'd forget to tell people to actually crack the wine and have a taste, and we'd rab it on for maybe 20-30 minutes, sort of neglecting to let everyone know. Now, if you happen to have something celebratory in front of you, look, feel free to throw it in a glass.
To indulge.
Yeah, look, and no better way to start a Sunday, anywhere really, than with a bit of sparkling. So, we're here, we're talking about the rosé. Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things that, we've discussed how successful this wine's been in the past for us. Lots of recent trophies and good results in awards and that sort of thing. Is this in terms of the process that we follow to make these wines? What makes the rosé a rosé as opposed to any of the other wines that we make, and why is it different to say the cuvée that sits ahead of it in the list? Have you got
a simple answer for that?
Simple answer for that?
Yeah, okay. I don't know. It's not a great background to be looking at the colour, but one thing you will notice is how light the colour here on this rosé is. It's what we would term a blush, as opposed to the colour that you would typically think of a rosé, that lovely pink. This has a pinky tone hue to it, but it also has a little bit of bronziness to it as well. Rosé.
I have to say, it smells really good at this time of the morning.
Rosé, I hope you can hear us okay, guys, because we actually have the cellar door operating in the background, so I do apologise. There is a bit of background noise.
Chatter.
Rosé itself is a style of wine before it is a colour. The colour is purely a byproduct of the process, and there are a number of ways to get that. With still wine, the way that we all know and love is that we extract a little bit of colour out of the skins as we press, and that is what gives the rosé colour, that lovely pink hue. In this instance, we actually use a very different methodology. We actually make and store this wine as a white wine. So the process of sparkling, we make a base wine in the winery first. We ferment through to dry as a still wine. So that's sitting in the winery, and we then add a sugar and yeast culture to it, and then we rebottle. After adding that, we rebottle so those sugars can ferment and bottle again, and we're left with a sparkling wine in bottle. Now that process of bottling is called tirage, and so we've then got a fermented product in bottle that is now also bone dry. It's fermented away all the sugars, and at this stage, even for this product, it is stored as a white wine. We store the product. In this instance, this has been in the bottle for a little over 7 years.
Went into this bottle back in August of 2012, so it's been in there quite a while.
So it's been there a long time, and we let it just sit in bottle over that time to build complexity in that lovely yeast character.
You could talk. I think you could probably talk for another 40 minutes about why that time on lees is so important. You know, in terms of complexity and structure of wines, but we probably don't have quite that amount of time today. But it is a very important part of what we've been doing. Certainly our aim from the get-go. We can have these wines in the market within 3 or 4 months of the tirage bottling that Dave mentioned.
Correct.
So that secondary fermentation, it does take a little bit of time. We do it in the cold of winter, so we're asking a lot of these wines to get through in a hurry, so they take a little bit of time. But there's nothing stopping us, once that secondary fermentation is complete, to clean these up and get them in the market and you'd have a beautiful, bright, fresh, lifted style of sparkling wine. We don't do that.
No.
And there's a reason.
Correct. One of the benefits of holding on to a wine for that time is, as I said, it builds complexity through the palate, which is, adds to the interest of the wine over time. But the other thing it does is it softens the acidity in the bottle over that time. The build-up of yeast and bready, brioche characters and the development of the fruit in the bottle helps balance out the acidity and the dryness of the wine. So the result of that is that when we do release it and we finish the product, we need to add less sugar to balance that. So they are very dry, savoury styles, relying very heavily on the fruit development and yeast development in the bottle to add complexity. So what do we do at the end?
No. Well, they're not. And Dave sort of covered that at the beginning about the different styles. We've got 5 traditional method sparklings in our lineup now, and they are all really different, as Dave alluded to earlier. And we've gone from, in the early days when we did release them a bit younger because we wanted to get some stuff out and in the marketplace, and they were bright and very much an aperitif kind of style. They were that easy drinking, pop at the beginning when your mates arrived for a dinner party type thing. Whereas now we're making wines with a lot more complexity and maturity and depth of flavour and all these sorts of things. And so the other, we referenced the dinner we had last week. We served 5 wines. They were the only wines we served all night. And we had a range of different food matches with those. And some were brighter and fresher, and others needed far more, weightier food matching.
Correct.
So don't just think a sparkling wine is a bright, fresh aperitif
or
style.
a drink to start with. They are styles that can be matched with a lot of different types of food. And as we illustrated last week, you can actually have an entire 5-course meal just using sparkling wine quite successfully. So Ed, we store the product. We've held on to it for 7.5 years or thereabouts.
Yep. What
do we do?
There's a very technical part of the process called the disgorging, or riddling and disgorging, I guess is the true term. You've often seen, if anyone's been to Champagne, even if you haven't been to Champagne, you would have seen footage of these beautiful chalky limestone caves underneath these wineries with these A-frame racks in them everywhere, and they're called riddling racks. And as Dave just sort of indicated, the bottle's been lying horizontal for 7.5 years, and so has a all the sediment.
Deposit.
How does the yeast deposits lying on the bottom? And we've got to get that out of the bottle. And so the riddling and disgorging process is where all that happens. So it goes, the traditional method was it went into a riddling rack, still horizontal, and over a course of many months it was rotated and turned up so that the top of the bottle was pointing down. And all that happens is during that time all the yeast slowly falls into the neck of the bottle. And then the bottle would be what the Frenchies call on point, which kind of makes a lot of sense.
Makes sense.
Yeah, they're kind of on their point. At that stage, we then need to work out how to get the yeast out of the bottle, and that is the disgorging process. Now, we know because we've all had these wines before, when you open these, they're under pressure, and the same thing happens at this time. So these at this point have all the sediment in the bottom. They've got a crown seal on them at this point in time, not a cork and a muselet. So they then get their necks frozen. So we put them in a super cold bath of liquid that essentially just freezes the very bottom of the.
Well, it freezes. Yeah, it freezes the solids before it freezes the liquid.
That's right.
Well,
because
the
there's
benefit
alcohol
there.
in it.
Correct.
Yeah. So the solids freeze, and then we can turn the bottle back up the right way, and the solids are frozen in the top. It then gets the top knocked off it. Because it's under pressure, it shoots out the plug of lees, and that's all the filtration and fining basically that happens on these wines.
You've then got a perfectly clarified wine ready to drink. There is no other process required for the volume of wine that's still left in the bottle. It is essentially ready to drink. You could pour it out and drink it there, and it would be as clarified and clear as that. It would, however, be extremely dry.
It is very dry, and this is the point where we get to, and this is what makes these wine styles so fascinating and so enjoyable to make, is that we get to play with them again.
Yeah.
So we then conduct bench trials ahead of this time, where we determine what's going back into these wines, the dosage as it's called, because as you imagine, when the top's knocked off these, they're under pressure, they do gush. We lose a bit of volume, and so we have this opportunity to put something else back in there. Now we may choose to put the exact same wine back in the bottle and top it with the same wine, or we might choose to use something else, and that's where this becomes really interesting for this particular wine.
So that process, the product we're making to top this wine with is called the liqueur. And it can be, as Ed alluded to, we can decant and use the same product to top with. Oh, it's gone.
That's very good.
We can also use base wines we've got in the winery, so still wines, some Chardonnay perhaps. We could use water if need be, and it's not uncommon. It changes the structure of the palate quite a lot. The other thing we can use is brandy spirit. There are a number of different products. As long as they are water or wine-based products, we can use them to top the bottle back up. We typically use either a reserve base that we've got in the winery, or the product we have that we decant and use the same product back into the bottle. Now, in this instance, where it gets really tricky, to make the rosé, we actually use table Pinot Noir, red table Pinot Noir as the liqueur, at around 2% of the volume goes back as a red wine, and that's what gives it its colour.
Now, as we've discussed before, and I'm not sure how well you can see that there particularly, it's not exactly pink, it's got a blush, as Dave mentioned. The reason it only has a blush is because we've made this on flavour.
Correct.
So we could easily have added 10% table Pinot Noir, and it would have been a beautiful pinky colour, but we didn't. We only added 2%, and we stopped at 2% because that is where the wine tasted its best.
Correct. So going back to the fact that rosé is a style before it is a colour, what we're looking for here, and you'll see it's quite dramatic, the change from our cuvee that is a lovely, zesty, fresh, white Chardonnay Pinot blend to this wine. You'll see this lovely development of fruit, and it really lifts and enhances the seductiveness of the strawberry fruit on the palate.
Seductive strawberries.
I've been using that a bit actually. Really lifts the floral fruit right from the front to the mid palate, so you get this lovely development. The key then is going back to that structural element of the acid. You get this lovely tightness, builds from the mid palate and gives it length. So it's still dry and savoury, but really a lovely textural wine with lovely fruit development through the palate, as opposed to the cuvee that maintains that lovely fresh zestiness through the palate. So very different style by just adding literally 2% Pinot Noir.
One of the most remarkable things for me is how much of a difference that little injection of 2% Pinot can have on the finished product. It's quite remarkable. We do disgorgings of these wines all the time, and in fact, only last week we've got some down. The next disgorging of this wine is off being prepared as we speak, and we did a trial the other day with Drew, our winemaker, and it's interesting. We spoke. I can't remember. Each time we do this, the dosage and the liqueur changes because the wine is a different age.
It could be a year older than it was the last time we did it.
So it's never a sort of lock it in and we're always going to do exactly the same thing. Each wine is very different and we have to approach it with a different sort of mindset and it's going to get a very individual dosage and liqueur. And strangely enough, the next rosé that's in production is about 3.5% Pinot Noir.
Right.
As opposed to the sort of 2 that we've done in this one. So I believe there is a bit more
colour,
pinky colour coming on the next one. Again, it stopped there because that was where it tasted the best and sat the best on the palate.
It's all about palate structure, as the colour is really inconsequential to the outcome for us, but it does always hold just a slight blush. It gives it the indication of a rosé. Now, Ed, I was just going to add one other thing. The fact that this is actually a non-vintage wine. And a lot of people often ask us, particularly in the cellar door, what actually dictates a non-vintage or a vintage product. I'll start with a vintage product because that's a little easier. A vintage wine is 100% in this instance from a particular vintage. So our current release vintage wines, we have a 2016 Blanc de Noir.
Yep.
We have a 2012 vintage wine that is a Chardonnay Pinot blend, so a white, and we also have a 2010 current vintage Blanc de Blanc. So they are all from that particular vintage. Now, what I guess creates a non-vintage wine is, and the reason we do it, I guess, is why it's important as well. And you'll notice if you drink champagne, 90% of the product we have in Australia are non-vintage champagnes. So that is, they are created from various vintages, and the reason for doing that is to create consistency of product. They want those products and repetition. They want those products for the consumer to look as they did the last time you bought a bottle off the shelf, and you get that reliability of style, and that's what we're trying to achieve here.
When you go to Champagne, and you should do it one day.
Don't.
We don't need to go down that path. When you go to Champagne, and if you do talk to a winemaker in that part of the world, and you ask them where the skill in making traditional method sparklings is, it is around being able to replicate that non-vintage wine year in, year out. Now some of those guys have individual vintages kept separately, and they will go down and they will get 27 litres of 1984, and they'll get 64 litres of 83, and they'll get all these wines from past vintages and put them together to make a new wine. We don't do it that way. We keep what is called a more like a cellar system, if anybody knows that system.
It's also used for sherry.
Yep.
So anybody who's a sherry nut, you'll be familiar with the term.
Yeah, but essentially we keep a very large tank of wine in the winery, and every time we do a non-vintage blend, we take a portion of that tank and we use it as the basis for the next version of this wine.
Correct. So that tank that we have, every year we take a portion out and we put a new, fresh volume of wine into it, and it's held as a still wine.
Yep.
This isn't a sparkling product, it's held as a still product that we use to give that consistency of product year to year.
Yeah, and that's the key with non-vintage styles. We want you to pick up a non-vintage cuvee or a non-vintage rosé and go, I don't see the difference from the last one I had. Yet it could be a different disgorging or a different year that it went into bottle even.
Correct.
So that's the skill around that. We've only tasted the rosé today. Dave, do you have a favourite in the lineup of
I do actually.
Swift sparkling products?
It does
Where do
change,
yeah.
but currently it's the Blanc de
On your
Noir.
mood or your...
Yeah,
or
sometimes.
or the
Depends
weather?
on the time of the day.
Right.
Which way is the wind blowing? No, currently it's our newest release, which is the Blanc de Noir. So for those who aren't aware, Blanc de Blanc is a style that many are familiar with. So Blanc de Blanc is white and white. It's 100% Chardonnay fruit, whereas Blanc de Noir is 100% Pinot fruit. And it's a style that we don't see as much here in Australia.
Yep.
But it is a really interesting wine. It is younger than our other wines. It's a 2016 vintage, and there was no commercial reason to rush it to the market earlier than the other wines, though what we did choose to do, because there's a lovely inherent richness to Pinot fruit, that coupled with the fact in 2016 we made some of our base wines in some old oak barrels, and that adds to the complexity and the savouriness and richness of that wine as well. It doesn't need as much time in bottle before it's released, and as a result it's just got this lovely complexity of fruit. I'm really interested in the style. It's a little left of centre from our other wines, and that's what I love about it.
I would say it's kind of the one that really stands out in the lineup, and I think a lot of it's to do with age. I think most of our other wines have had what I describe as an extended lees aging, and that shows through. Where this one only doing about that 3 years is much brighter and fresher and more lifted on the way, on the palate.
Yep.
So that's the thing for me that really sort of stands out. But we mentioned at the beginning, Dave, that we're at our Nashdale cellar door.
We are.
If anyone's come to visit us here, you'll notice when you drive in, you come through a small vineyard that we planted a couple of years ago. That's looking $1 million today. Actually, I have to say, it's looking really good.
It's enjoyed the rain.
Yes, it has very much enjoyed the rain. We've planted 2 particular varieties up on this site. Do you want to elaborate on why and what the purpose of that is for?
So as Ed said, this is a new site for us. We're actually soon to start building a new cellar door and a restaurant here on this site, and we've got quite a lot of land here that was an apple orchard, and rather than rushing in to plant out vineyards as we have a tendency, it's a very slow process, so you want to get started. What we've done is what I would call kind of our experimental vineyard in one of the better terms. We've planted 3 varieties. We've planted Chardonnay, Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier. Now we haven't talked about Pinot Meunier at all.
Gosh,
That's probably a whole
nother. Strap in everyone, we're going to go, we're going to keep going.
So Chardonnay and Pinot, but we've just planted a little vineyard here, but we've actually planted all on rootstock. So that is, they're not planted on their own roots. We've used a known rootstock that is actually disease resistant, but also drought,
particularly
phylloxera, which we won't go into that. But it's
so many things.
It is the killer of grapevines. But what we've done is planted multiple different clones of the same variety. So we have 5 different clones of Chardonnay here, and 4 different clones of Pinot Noir, and then 1 planting of Pinot Meunier. And now the reason for doing that is that this is a completely new site for our business. Whilst we have a vineyard further up the hill here, we have no history and experience of taking fruit off this soil. So what we wanted to do was grow some vines on the site so that we could assess 2 things. One is so that we could assess the quality of the growth, so the viticultural aspect of growing the fruit, and the other was the aspect of looking at how the fruit, people coming, looking how the fruit develops into wine. So this year we'll make a little portion of wine out of each of those clones.
Yeah.
And what we're going to do in time here is actually decide off the basis of that information which clones of those particular varieties we will plant into the rest of the vineyard.
Yeah. And the idea being, I guess, that whilst we like high elevation fruit particularly for sparkling wines, not every site is suitable for sparkling wine, and there's very much see how this site goes and potentially end up with fruit in a Swift product down the track.
Unless you've got more to speak about in terms of the sparkling, what I was going to add, listen, we'll probably wrap up in the next 5 minutes. If you do have any questions, specifically, by all means post them on there, and our assistant might be able to read them back to us, so we're covering things off.
She's
but
very good at it. She's got a lot
we
of
did
tips.
bring up the Pandora's box that is Pinot Meunier.
Yes.
And we have a bottle here, and it is quite relevant because it's also in one of the packs that you can get here.
It is.
Now, would you like to give a very brief rundown of what Pinot Meunier is?
So Pinot Meunier is a fascinating little variety, actually. Its origins, and it's sort of apt to what we're talking about today, its origins really are in Champagne, and even to this day, something like 25 to 30% of the vineyards planted are still Meunier. It's a very important part of the traditional Champagne blend. We went on the hunt for it to use in some bubbles, and since 2018, it's made up just a little portion, a little X factor in some of our sparklings along the way. But we also now use it in a couple of other products. One is our Snowline Rosé, and the other one is the straight Meunier. Now that is in the red pack, I think, that you can purchase. It's a really, really interesting and fascinating little wine. We started sort of pushing it into other products because we quite enjoyed, the wine itself when we had it in the winery, and it presents a lot like Pinot Noir, I guess. But unlike Pinot, we tend to make it in this instance into a brighter, sort of more fresh fruit, lifted berries, things like that. And it doesn't have sort of those earthy tones, I guess, that a lot of Pinots tend to have when we give them their extended time on their skins and barrels and all that sort of thing.
Drink it young, drink it fresh.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's really,
it's a lovely daytime sort of style for me. But a lovely little red there that comes in that red pack.
So for those who are keen to try what a specifically sparkling variety looks like as a red,
and by itself,
give the red pack a go. Now, we'll just cover off the other important things here.
Yep.
Which are you can view, obviously, the tastings that have already been filmed.
Correct.
So please log in and have a look. That's on the Orange 360 website, orange360.com.au/Lane Cove Festival. And there's some great stuff on there from a number of different producers doing some different things. Chardonnay, Pinots, sparkling, we do, and the Pinot Meunier. There's a more in-depth tasting of those two wines on there as well. Prosecco. I can't think of what the rest are, but there's some really interesting stuff there to look at.
Yeah.
Sales. Hello, Olga. How are you? What is the ideal temperature to serve rosé?
Well, the sparkling rosé, we this comes up a lot. Temperature. Now, when we look at wines in their more raw state through the winery, nothing ever gets refrigerated. So we often look at things at ambient temperature. And we do that for a couple of reasons. One, because it's not practical to refrigerate everything. But the other is that temperature has a tendency to suppress aroma and flavour. So when we talk about that, we like whites particularly cool, and most of us put them in a refrigerator, a domestic refrigerator that sits at about 4 degrees.
Too cold.
Too cold in general terms. Do you have a number in mind?
Listen, I don't actually. I don't know for sparkling what the specific number is, but I will add, the thing that tears me apart is when I see people put sparkling champagne in the fridge or the freezer specifically to make it colder because they love it to be really cold. And I understand the appeal, but it just numbs the aromas of the wine. So my advice is slightly warm is better than slightly cooler if you really want to get the best out of the aromatics of the wine.
Yeah, look, we've the assistant and I occasionally, when we have a bottle of sparkling wine, get it out of the fridge and leave it for half an hour before we pour it. And that just adds a couple of degrees to the wine, and it does. And the reason we do that is to get more from the wine. I think, Olga, if I'm right, you're going to show off the rosé to some of your friends shortly. I'd go with the half an hour out of the fridge before you serve it to get the most from it. And
so much of the wine is the aromatics.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you're dulling the aromatics, you're really missing a good proportion of the style and the wine itself.
Absolutely, agree 100%.
Excellent. Well,
All
thank
right.
you guys. We hope you. We're sorry again that we couldn't attend this
there in
year
person.
Down on the river, which is a shame. But I am told 2021 is going ahead. So if anyone has a crystal ball, we'll be there. But thank you for tuning in. Thank you Lane Cove Council, and thank you Orange 360 for making these things work. And I'm pleased that we could still do a virtual equivalent of this.
Yep, absolutely. So thank you for tuning in, everyone, and hopefully we'll see you perhaps in the cellar door in Orange sometime soon.
Correct.
Cheers. Thanks. Bye.